I stared at the glass wall of my office cubicle and whispered, "Today has to matter." Lena leaned over the divider and said, "You're early again." "I always am," I said. "Maybe he'll notice." She frowned. "You don't need his approval." "I do," I said too fast. "Ethan decides everything." At 10 sharp, Ethan called, "My office." "Now." I grabbed my notebook and walked in. He didn't look up. "You sent another proposal." "Yes," I said. "I stayed up all night refining it." He smirked. "You work hard. That's all you're good at." I laughed nervously. Hard work leads somewhere. He finally met my eyes. "Not for everyone." I swallowed. "You said you'd mentor me." "I did," he said. "And I taught you your limits." "I want to lead a project," I said. He leaned back. "You're not leadership material." The words hit harder than I expected. "I've increased revenue," I said. "You followed instructions," he replied. "Big difference." Outside, I bumped into Mark near the elevator. He nodded once and said, "Rough meeting." "I'll be fine," I said. His eyes lingered, thoughtful, but he walked away. Back at my desk, Lena whispered, "What did he say?" I hesitated. That I should know my place. She clenched her jaw. "He's wrong. He built this company," I said. "He knows success." She touched my arm. "So do you." That afternoon, Ethan stopped by my desk. "Walk with me," he said. My heart raced. "You're ambitious," he said quietly. "Yes," I said. "That can be dangerous," he said. "I just want a chance," I replied. He smiled thinly. "We'll review your promotion soon." "When?" I asked. "Next quarter," he said. Hope bloomed despite the warning bells. "Thank you," I said. He paused. "Don't disappoint me." As he walked away, I told myself, "This is it." I ignored the dread tightening my chest. I chose to believe him. Later, Lena said, "You're shaking." "I'm excited," I said. "You're scared," she replied. "Both," I admitted. Mark passed again and said, "Big plans tonight?" "I'll be working," I said. He paused. "Careful who you trust." I forced a smile. "I trust my boss." Mark sighed. "That's what worries me." At my desk, I rehearsed speeches in my head. "I can do this," I whispered. Ethan's voice echoed, "Know your limits." I muttered, "I'll prove you wrong." Before leaving, Ethan called out, "One more thing." "Yes." I asked. "Don't get emotional," he said. "I won't," I replied. He smirked. "Good girls never do." The office lights dimmed as I packed up. Lena said, "Dinner later?" "Rain check," I said. "I need to prepare." "For what?" she asked. "For my future," I said. I stepped into the hallway and breathed out. "This is my moment," I told myself. My phone buzzed. A message from Ethan read, "Don't mess this up." I typed, "I won't." My hands trembled. I thought, if I succeed, I belong. I didn't see the trap yet. I walked outside and said, "I won't fail." The city answered with silence. I felt small but hopeful. I believed loyalty would save me. I believed effort was enough. I believed Ethan meant his promise. That belief followed me home. I didn't know hope could hurt this much. Yet I held it close, smiling like a fool. I walked into the conference room thinking, this is it. Ethan stood at the head of the table and said, "Let's begin." I sat down and smiled at Lena. She whispered, "Good luck." I nodded. Ethan clicked the screen and said, "This strategy will change everything." My stomach tightened. Those slides were mine. Every chart, every sentence, every idea. I raised my hand and said, "Ethan, that's the proposal I sent you." He didn't look at me. He said, "Let me finish." One manager said, "This is brilliant." Another added, "Why haven't we done this sooner?" Ethan smiled and said, "I've been refining it for months." My mouth went dry. I whispered, "No." Lena stared at me, eyes wide. I said louder, "That was my work." Ethan turned and laughed softly. He said, "You helped, sure." I felt my heart pounding. "I wrote it," I said. The room went quiet. Ethan tilted his head and said, "Are you interrupting me?" Mark spoke carefully. He said, "Maybe we should discuss authorship later." Ethan nodded. Later, he repeated. The meeting ended with applause. None of it was for me. I followed Ethan into the hallway and said, "Why did you do that?" He stopped and said, "Lower your voice. You stole my idea," I said. He sighed. "You should be grateful," he replied. "For what?" I asked. "For being in the room," he said. I said, "You promised to support me." He stepped closer and said, "I did support you." "You erased me," I said. He smiled coldly. "Credit belongs to leadership," he said. "I trusted you," I whispered. "That was your mistake," he said. I felt tears burn my eyes. "I can go to HR," I said. He laughed. "And say what?" he asked. "That you're emotional? That you misunderstood?" He leaned in and said, "You need me." I backed away and said, "I deserve better." He shrugged. "You won't survive without me," he said. The words crushed my chest. I watched him walk away. Lena rushed over and said, "I saw everything." "He took it," I said. "He stole all of it," she said. "Report him." "I can't," I whispered. "Why not?" she asked. "Because he's right," I said. "He controls everything." Mark passed by and paused. He said quietly, "Be careful." I nodded but couldn't speak. The office felt too loud. Every laugh sounded cruel. At my desk, Lena said, "This isn't over." I stared at my screen. "It feels over," I said. She said, "You're shaking." "So is my whole life," I replied. That night, Ethan emailed the team. He wrote, "Proud of my work today." I read it again and again. Something inside me broke. I said out loud, "He used me." The realization hurt more than the theft. I trusted him. I believed him. Now I knew the truth. The man I admired didn't see me as a person. He saw me as disposable. As I shut down my computer, I thought, my mentor is my enemy. HR said, "Please sit." I sat. The woman smiled and said, "This won't take long." I asked, "Where's Ethan?" She said, "He won't be joining us." My chest tightened. She slid a paper toward me and said, "We're terminating your position." I laughed once and said, "For what?" "Poor performance," she replied. I said, "That's not true." She nodded like she'd heard it before. "This decision is final," she said. I whispered, "He did this." She said, "Please sign." I said, "After everything?" She avoided my eyes. I stood up and said, "Tell him he won." She didn't respond. At my desk, Lena rushed over. She said, "No." I nodded. "They fired me," I said. She said, "I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you," I replied. She hugged me and whispered, "This isn't your fault." I packed my things slowly. Someone coughed. Someone laughed. No one looked at me. I felt invisible. Lena said, "Call me tonight." "I will," I said. As I walked out, I said to myself, "Don't cry." The elevator doors closed. I cried anyway. At home, I dropped my bag and said, "I'm done." Rachel rushed in and said, "What happened?" "I got fired," I said. She pulled me into a hug. "They can't do that," she said. "They did," I replied. I sat on the floor and said, "He said I'd fail." Rachel said, "Who?" "Ethan," I said. She said, "He's wrong." "I believed him," I whispered. She said, "That doesn't make it true." I said, "I gave him everything." She said, "You gave him your work." "I gave him my trust," I said. Rachel said, "And he broke it." I said, "I feel erased." She said, "You're still here." I shook my head and said, "I don't know who I am without that job." Rachel said, "You're my sister." I said, "That's not enough." She said, "It's everything." I lay on the couch and said, "What if he's right?" Rachel said, "About what?" "That I won't survive without him," I said. She laughed sharply. "He doesn't own your future," she said. I stared at the ceiling and said, "I let him decide my worth." Rachel said, "You can take it back." "Not today," I said. "That's okay," she replied. My phone buzzed. An email from Ethan. It said, "This was inevitable." I deleted it and said, I hate him. Rachel said. I know. Later alone I whispered. I failed. The silence answered. I felt small. I felt thrown away. I remembered his voice saying, You need me. I whispered back, I guess you were wrong. But the doubt stayed. I woke up to my phone buzzing and said, Another rejection. No one answered me. I scrolled and read. We chose another candidate. I whispered. Of course you did. At the kitchen table I opened a bill and laughed. I can't pay you, I said. The paper stayed silent. Another envelope waited. So you too? I asked. My landlord texted. Rent due. I typed. Working on it. I deleted the message. I said, I'm lying now. At the temp agency the woman said, Warehouse shift. I nodded. She asked, Experience. I need food, I said. She looked at me and said, Start tonight. During my break I sat on the floor and whispered, Maybe Ethan was right. The thought hurt. I said, Maybe I can't survive. I hated myself for thinking it. That night I counted coins and said, This can't be it. The room felt empty. I said, I worked so hard. No one argued. My phone rang. I stared at it. Unknown caller, I said. I answered anyway. Hello. Hi, Mark said. I froze. Why are you calling me? I asked. He said, Because I owe you the truth. I sat down fast. What truth? I asked. I know Ethan stole your work, he said. My chest tightened. You knew. I said. I suspected, he replied. I didn't have proof before. I laughed bitterly. So I lost everything, I said. He said. I'm sorry. I asked why now. I found evidence, he said. I stood and said, Is this pity? No, he answered. It's an opportunity. I'm broke, I said. I know, he replied. I can't rescue you. Then why call? I asked. He said, I can guide you. I swallowed and said, I don't need saving. I know, he said. You need truth. I said, I feel erased. He replied, You weren't invisible. That broke me. I started believing him, I admitted. Mark said, Don't. He wanted you small, he added. I whispered, I don't feel strong. You don't have to, he said. The call ended. I sat in silence. The bills were still there. My fear was still loud. But something shifted. Someone believed me. I said out loud, I was seen. The sound of hope scared me. I wasn't fixed. I wasn't safe. But for the first time, rock bottom wasn't silent. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my laptop and said, I can't keep waiting for someone to fix this. Rachel leaned against the counter and asked, What are you thinking? I said, I'm going to start my own company. She raised an eyebrow. With what money? I shrugged. With what I have, what I know, and what Ethan threw away. Mark had said the same thing over the phone. Build it quietly. They won't see you coming. I whispered, I have to try. The first night was brutal. I muttered, I can't do this. The bills sat on the counter like accusations. Rachel poured tea and said, Then don't. But keep trying. I typed furiously, designing plans, jotting ideas Ethan had ignored. Lena slipped me a note in the office one day. Client feedback. They want more innovation. Use it. I read it and whispered, You're risking too much for me. She wrote back, Some risks are worth it. Late nights became normal. I called Rachel at 2 a.m. saying, I'm scared I'll fail. She said softly, You've survived worse. Keep going. I laughed bitterly. I survived by being crushed. Now I survive by trying. I pored over spreadsheets, drafted emails, and scheduled calls. Every time doubt crept in, I reminded myself, I am doing this. I am acting. Mark checked in occasionally. How's the progress? He asked over the phone. Slow, I admitted. But moving. He said, Good. Keep Ethan out of your mind. He doesn't exist here. I whispered, I like that. He doesn't exist. That idea became my quiet rebellion. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't reacting. I was building. Every completed plan, every small success felt like a victory. I caught myself smiling when I thought, Ethan has no idea what I'm doing. The thought gave me power. I typed late into the night, fueled by fear, hope and anger. Rachel called once and said, "You sound different." I said, "I am different." Lena brought me data quietly, guiding me without exposing herself. I whispered, "I owe you." By the time dawn crept through the blinds, I leaned back and said, "I'm not small anymore." The weight of helplessness had lifted slightly. I still had nothing but ideas and determination, but it was enough. I could survive without Ethan. I could thrive. I could finally act for myself, and that was more satisfying than any approval I had ever sought. I walked into my small office and said aloud, "This is happening." The first client had signed the contract. Lena peeked in and whispered, "I told you they'd notice." I smiled, but my heart still raced. "It's real," I said. "We're real." Mark called that afternoon. I saw the numbers. "Impressive," he said. I laughed softly. "Feels unreal." He replied, "Keep Ethan out of your mind. Don't give him the power to affect you anymore." I whispered, "He doesn't exist here." Later, at a networking event, I saw Ethan across the room. He didn't see me at first. I said under my breath, "He has no idea." When he finally looked, his surprise was obvious. "Why is she here?" I heard him mutter. I walked past and smiled faintly, saying to myself, "I'm not the girl you dismissed." I spoke with a potential investor nearby. "Your concept is impressive," he said. "Thank you," I replied. Ethan's glare lingered at the back of the room, but I ignored it. Back at the office, Lena said, "You seemed calm tonight." I admitted, "I feel powerful but scared." She nodded. "Good. Use it." That evening, I reviewed client emails and schedules, whispering, "We're growing faster than I imagined." Mark called again. "Be patient. Karma is slow, but it works," he said. I laughed quietly. "Feels like it's breathing already." The next morning, gossip floated around. Ethan's team missed a deadline. Someone said, "He's losing control." I typed notes furiously. "I don't celebrate, but it's changing," I whispered. Lena said, "You're noticing it too much." I replied, "No. I'm noticing him crumble while I rise." The thought gave me strength. When I hung up my phone that evening, I said, "I am not reacting anymore." The fear I carried for months had eased. I could see the balance shifting. The world felt quieter, yet louder than before. I whispered, "This is just the beginning." Ethan didn't know I existed, and that ignorance became my power. I felt calm for the first time, watching karma slowly breathe around us both. I stared at the acquisition papers on my desk and whispered, "I can't believe this is real." Rachel leaned against the doorway and asked, "Are you sure about this?" I said, "It's the chance to take what was once mine and make it stronger." She hesitated. "It feels risky." I shrugged. "Everything I've done has been risky." Mark called that morning. "You're serious?" I said, "Yes. I want it all." He replied, "Then go carefully. The board will notice." I whispered, "I've been careful my whole life. Now I'll be smart." I walked into the office where Ethan's old team still lingered. They avoided my eyes. I said softly, "Time to make this official." They muttered excuses, tried to explain failures, but I ignored them. I signed the papers and I whispered, "I own what they said I couldn't." Lena peeked in. "You look different." I smiled faintly. "I feel different. This isn't just a company. It's proof." She nodded. "You earned it." I said, "No. I survived it." Later, I received a call from Ethan. "I want to discuss terms," he said. I replied calmly, "There's nothing to discuss. The decision is final." He hesitated. "This isn't how it should be." I whispered, "You taught me it doesn't matter what should be, only what is." That night, I sat alone and said, "I'm finally the one in control." Rachel texted, "Dinner tomorrow? Celebrate." I replied, "Yes, but quietly. I don't need fanfare. I just need to know I can do this." I thought back to all the nights I cried, all the fear, all the doubt. I whispered, "Every struggle led here." Mark had said, "You didn't win by revenge." I nodded. "No. I won by building, surviving, and proving them wrong silently." The city lights glimmered outside my window. I whispered, I am unstoppable now. Ethan's empire was gone. Mine was rising. And for the first time, I felt the quiet satisfaction of someone who had truly outlasted their betrayer. I leaned back in my chair and said aloud, I own my destiny, and no one can take that from me. My phone buzzed and I saw his name, Ethan. I froze and whispered, why now? I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. Hello, I said cautiously. Can we meet? He asked. His voice sounded uncertain, not commanding like before. I swallowed. Why? I asked. Silence. Then he said, I owe you an explanation. I laughed softly, bitterly. An explanation? After everything? He sighed. I made mistakes. I underestimated you. I felt my chest tighten. Underestimated me? You stole my work, took my career, and humiliated me. I paused. You don't get to call that a mistake. I know, he admitted. I wanted to say it before it was too late. I clenched my fists. Too late. Way too late. Silence fell. I whispered, I don't even know if I can hear you anymore. He said, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I interrupted. Just what? Want to ease your conscience? It won't work. He hesitated, then said, I see what I lost. You deserved better. I looked away. I don't need your pity. He admitted, I was wrong. Completely. I whispered, do you even realize what I went through? He said quietly, I think about it all the time. I scoffed. Too little, too late. We sat in silence. I felt the old anger bubbling but tempered by months of growth. I said softly, I'm not the same person you crushed. He looked at me surprised. You're stronger. I nodded. I am. He tried to speak again. I held up my hand. There's nothing left to say. I don't need your words. I needed action. And I gave myself that. After I hung up, I whispered to the empty room, I am free of you. The weight lifted slightly. I realized I didn't want revenge, I didn't want validation. I wanted closure. And for the first time I truly felt it. I said aloud, the past is done. I belong to myself now. Later Lena called. How did it go? I smiled faintly. He apologized. I listened. That's all. She said. Sounds like progress. I nodded. Yes. For the first time I feel peace. Not joy. Not triumph. Just peace. I looked out the window at the city lights and whispered, I don't need him anymore. I never did. I only needed me. And that was enough. I unlocked my office door and said, I never imagined this view would be mine. Lena followed me in and laughed softly. You earned every inch, she said. I sat at my desk and replied, I still feel like the scared woman you met months ago. She shook her head. You're not her anymore. I paused and said, I wish someone had told me that back then. Lena leaned closer and asked, then tell them now. I hosted my first mentorship meeting that afternoon. A young woman said, I don't think I belong here. I felt my chest tighten. I told her, I used to believe that too. She looked at me and whispered, how did you survive? I answered, by refusing to stay small. After they left, I sat alone and said, this is why it mattered. Mark called and asked, are you finally enjoying success? I smiled and said, I'm learning how to hold it. He replied, that's leadership. I thanked him and said, you saw me when I couldn't. Rachel visited that evening with takeout and said, you look peaceful. I laughed. I feel earned, I said. She sat beside me and asked, do you miss the old you? I thought and answered, I forgive her. Rachel smiled and said, she got you here. Later Lena asked, do you ever think about him? I replied, only as a lesson. She nodded. You turned pain into purpose. I whispered, I had to. I walked through the office hearing new voices, new ideas, and I said quietly, this is what healing sounds like. I stood by the window and remembered the girl who begged for approval. I said aloud, you survived. The reflection didn't look weak anymore. I felt steady. I felt capable. I felt proud. My phone buzzed with an email from a new hire. She wrote, thank you for believing in me. I replied, I know how much it matters. I leaned back and said, This is the woman I needed. I closed my laptop and whispered, I'm done chasing worth. The office lights dimmed. I felt complete, not because I won, but because I became someone stronger. I knew tomorrow would bring new challenges. I said, I'm ready. My voice didn't shake. The silence felt supportive, not empty. I gathered my things slowly, breathing evenly. Before leaving, I looked around once more and said, this space will change lives. I believed it. I believed myself. That belief was everything. I locked the door and walked into the night. I didn't feel alone anymore. I felt grounded. I felt ready to give others what I was once denied. As I stepped forward, I said quietly, I made it. The city hummed back. I smiled and kept walking, already planning tomorrow. I no longer needed permission. I no longer needed validation. I carried my own proof inside me. The journey hurt, but it shaped me. I chose growth over bitterness. I chose myself. I whispered one last promise to the past version of me. I won't abandon you again. The air felt lighter as I walked away, finally whole, finally certain, finally free. I stepped forward into my future knowing I had already become enough. That knowledge stayed with me, steady and unbreakable. As my life continued forward, I stood at the window of my office watching the city lights flicker and whispered, I can't believe this is mine. Rachel had called earlier saying, you've earned it, and I had laughed softly. I survived it, I told her. I traced the skyline with my eyes and said, every setback, every betrayal, it all led here. Lena appeared with coffee and said, big night. I nodded. It's quiet, but it feels monumental. She smiled. You've come a long way. I replied. I've come far enough to know I'll never let anyone diminish me again. My phone buzzed with a message from a new hire. Thank you for believing in me. I typed back. I know how much that matters. I whispered to myself, I know what it feels like to be erased. I won't let it happen to anyone here. Mark called. You sound calm, he said. I smiled faintly. I feel complete, not because of revenge, but because I finally built something mine. He chuckled. That's the real victory. I whispered, yes, it is. I leaned back in my chair, remembering the nights I cried alone, the fear, the self-doubt, the humiliation. I survived it all, I said aloud. The office was silent except for the hum of the city outside. I felt a quiet strength. I was no longer reactive. I was proactive. I was free. I checked the company emails, the client updates, the partnerships growing steadily. I whispered, I made it happen. I didn't need him. I didn't need their approval. The thought made my chest swell with a calm pride I had never known. Later I called Rachel. Dinner, she asked. Yes, I replied. Celebrate quietly. I laughed softly. I don't need fanfare. I just need to feel this truth. I did it. As the night deepened, I walked through my office, seeing every desk, every employee working, feeling the energy I had created. I whispered, this is real. I built this. I survived. I succeeded. I stood at the window again, breathing deeply. I am unstoppable, I said. I am enough. I am mine. The city didn't answer. Didn't need to. I already knew. I thought back to Ethan, to every word he had thrown at me, every barrier he tried to place. I smiled faintly. You said I'd never succeed. But I did. Anyway. The lights of my office reflected in the window, and I whispered one last time. I own my life. I am proof. I stepped away from the window, calm, grounded, and ready. I no longer chased approval. I no longer feared betrayal. I had survived, I had grown, and I had finally arrived. I whispered quietly to myself, I succeeded. And nothing can take that from me.